what you need to know.
From the Goldberg Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
All right, what's going on? It's 3 o'clock. The Trailblazers season is over after yesterday's win over the Lakers. Prior to the game, the Trailblazers agreed on a multi-year contract extension with head coach Chauncey Billups. It's exit interview day on the Rip City Drive. The voice of the Trailblazers, Travis Demers, will join me coming up at 3:20. And Sean Hiken, our Trailblazer insider, in studio at 4. We're going to recap the Masters with David Coleman at 5:20. Elsewhere, the Phoenix Suns have fired head coach Mike Budenholzer. He was let go 1 year into a 5-year, $50 million contract. In New Orleans, the Pelicans have fired general manager David Griffin. And no surprise, but Luka's number 77 jersey is the number one selling jersey in the NBA. NBA play-in tournament will kick off tomorrow. Hawks at the Magic at 4:30, followed by the Grizzlies at the Warriors. Both games on TNT. The winner of that game will meet the Rockets in round one of the Western Conference playoffs. Rip City Drive with Chad Doing coming at you right now.
The home of the OSAA is 620 Rip City Radio. It's time for the Rip City Drive, brought to you by Lazy Boy. What's your strategy for comfort? Featuring the crazy and often irrational longtime Portland radio vet, Chad Doing.
I feel like my big focus is going into summer, really just getting light on my feet, moving my feet faster, laterally, being able to move quicker in the ball screen game. I want to work on my touch around the rim, being able to catch that ball in the pocket and, make moves and get to the rim and score efficiently, really knock down the three ball at a high level, make sure my shot's consistent and, having the same shot every time and, really, being physical and getting stronger and, everything I've been doing, these past, 2 months, the second half of the season, really just trying to take everything and just take it to the next level.
It feels incredible. This is my 17th time here, and I started to wonder if it would ever be my time. And I think, the last 10 years coming here with the burden of the Grand Slam on my shoulders and trying to achieve that, I'm sort of wondering what we're all going to talk about going into next year's Masters. But I'm just absolutely honored and thrilled and just so proud to be able to call myself a Masters champion.
Strap in. The Rip City Drive with Chad Doing starts now.
I have to give props to Rory McIlroy. I did not think he had what it took to pull that off yesterday. I thought for sure going into the final round that Bryson DeChambeau would create pressure and cause him to go down in flames, and that's what happened when the round began, but Rory was able to battle back. DeChambeau wilted, and then, like we've seen from Rory before, he had a couple of awkward moments, especially on 13, but he was able to bounce back and win it in a sudden death situation. What a finish it was. What a Masters. What a great tournament. And we're going to get to that with David Coleman. He'll join the show, PGA Dave, at 5:20. What's going on, my friends? It's really bizarre to be sitting here right now with the weight of the NBA season off my shoulders. It's really bizarre. And what a beautiful day it is, too, with the sunshine and the blue skies and the warm temperatures. It's like a day that was handed down from heaven. It's spectacular. And I'm excited about the show today because we have a lot of big things coming up. First off, Travis Demers is going to join the show coming up at 3:20. We'll get his take on the Chauncey Billups extension, what he's looking for during the course of the offseason, the next, big moves or big changes that we might see with the roster. And we'll get his take on the upcoming NBA Draft Lottery on May 12th. Travis Demers at 5:20. Sean Hiken is going to stop by and hang out with me in studio, at least for the 4 o'clock hour. Our Trailblazer insider from Rose Garden Report, Sean Hiken, and we'll cover all things Trailblazers in our exit interview with Sean and then David Coleman at 5:20. Now, if you want to reach out, I'd love to hear from you, 503-248-0620. That is the telephone number. You can find me on social at Chad and Rip City, at Chad and Rip City, 503-248-0620. Also, big props to the Godfather Dwight James, who we had on the show at the beginning of last week. He was the one person in town who nailed the Chauncey Billups extension. He got in touch with the right people, got the information, put out a big piece, and that's indeed what happened with Chauncey Billups, who got the extension yesterday before the Blazers finished out their season against the Lakers. And I'll share my thoughts on Coach Billups and that extension here in just a moment. And we'll hear from both Chauncey and general manager Joe Cronin. So that's the plan for the program. It's kind of our Trailblazer exit interview day here on the Rip City Drive. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm struggling just a little bit right now. I thought after the game yesterday, as that weight of the NBA season came off my shoulders because of all the intense and insane amount of work that I go through and that everyone puts into the season, I was afraid I was going to get sick. I do a good job of supplying myself with plenty of supplements and vitamin C, and my throat was a little bit weird. So I wasn't sure what was going on, but I feel okay today. I'm just tired. And then I did get up and go play golf this morning, and thank goodness I did. It could not have been a better day. I wore shorts, I had a golf sweater on, and it was a spectacular day. And by the back nine, it started to get a little bit warm. But the problem is that my body now, over the next week and after 2 weeks, I'm going through the reconditioning process of playing golf 4 to 5 times a week and getting my body used to walking around a golf course every day. And I'm not exactly a spring chicken anymore, so that process is a little bit rough, and so I'm feeling it right now. Got a chiropractic adjustment, copious amounts of Advil, and I'm adjusting. So I'm going through a bit of a process right now, but my overall demeanor and my body, everything feels great. It's just nice to have the season over because there's a lot of work. And I had that stretch recently that ended on Saturday of 41 straight days of work. The problem is with the NBA season is you have games that spill into the weekends, and then you've got the show during the week, and then you've got other duties. And before you know it, you're working 7-day weeks. And I know there's a lot of people that put in work. Everyone's got different seasons in their work that's just busier than others. And basketball season is like that for me. So when the game was over yesterday, I got all the equipment together. I talked to a few people, and then I took one last walk out on the hardwood at Moda Center and took a look around. And it literally is like the last day of school. These people that you see all the time throughout the course of the season, a lot of them I won't see until next basketball season. And you move on and you do your own thing. I met up with my buddy Josh after the game yesterday at that Starbucks that's up there off Sylvan. And it was a perfect day. We're sitting out there on the patio just overlooking the 26 and having a cup of coffee and just talking. And it was just perfect outside, just like it was this morning and the way it is right now. It's absolutely awesome out there. It's great. And so yesterday during the game, I was watching the game, and I'm sitting there at press row. I've got my computer up, and I was watching the Masters. So I was doing a little double duty, paying attention to the Masters, paying attention to the NBA scoreboard, and then also watching the Trailblazer game. And that's how I spent it. The Masters in that final round was some fabulous golf. The tournament was exceptional. And Rory found a way to get it done, and now he's got the career Grand Slam. But I do want to thank each and every one of you who are with us throughout the course of the basketball season. I've said this before, and I mean this. It's a lot of fun to be able to share each and every game with you, the big moments, the day-to-day stuff, everything that we cover and that we go through throughout the course of the season. I know for you sports fans, you basketball fans, you Blazer fans, you enjoy it, but I really enjoy the opportunity to get a chance to connect with you. So thank you for your time. I certainly appreciate it, and I believe everyone else here at the station does it well, so thank you. All right, so the big news yesterday, and I had a feeling this might go down before the game, or at least this weekend, because we had gotten the itinerary from the team. They were going to hold all of their exit interviews on Sunday. And we knew if that was the case, that you would probably get an answer on Chauncey Billups before Monday. Would he come back? Were they going to part ways? Would he get a new deal done? And after having Dwight on the show, we knew that there was at least a 50-50 chance that what appeared to be impossible before the year began was becoming more and more likely. And that was the return of Blazers head coach Chauncey Billups. So they were able to get a deal done, and they announced a multi-year extension before the game. This coming a few days after the team had announced that they had agreed on terms with general manager Joe Cronin on a multi-year extension. Now, I was told that the two extensions are separate from one another, meaning they didn't re-sign Billups because they re-signed Cronin. They were two separate deals that were done for their own purposes and their own reasons. Now, as you know, I'm a big fan of Joe Cronin. I like him, but I think he's done a really good job with what he's been tasked to do, and that's rebuild the team and move on from a cornerstone like Damian Lillard. Not easy work. And you're not exactly going to be a popular guy when you move out the franchise cornerstone. But he did, and as a result, he's been able to acquire some great young talent. Scoot, Shaden, Klingon, Denny, and Tamani. That's a pretty good foundation to work with. And now we turn our attention to the vets. And by my count, we have 5 players to keep an eye on. Ant, Grant, Aiton, Matisse Thybul, Robert Williams III. And I really believe that that's going to be critical in the story that's told about Joe Cronin, what he's able to get in return for the veterans that he has amassed when the time comes to move them out and continue to add to this young core that he's got that provided energy, competition, excitement, and why the fan base is looking forward to next year. Now, with Chauncey Billups, there are fans who do not like the move at all. There are fans who were critical of Billups. They don't like his overall record as head coach. They don't like the job he's done with the young players. They don't like the hiring at all. Some don't like Billups because he was hired by Neil Olshey. And there are a lot of fans that don't like him. There's also fans that just don't like Billups because his name was associated with sexual misconduct allegations back in '97. But I like the move, and I really think the Blazers did the right thing by agreeing to terms with Chauncey Billups. Now, personally, I do like Billups a lot. He is one of the coolest coaches to deal with as a media member. He's very forthcoming in his answers. He just handles himself really cool. And if you talk to anyone outside of Portland, around the league, he is a beloved character, well-respected and beloved. So he's a good dude. And I like people who grind and work hard and get opportunities. I think it's great. And with Chauncey Billups, he created that opportunity this year with his constant work, the development of the young players on the roster, and the vast improvement we saw over the second half of the season. Now, I do believe this is important, and I've been told this by a couple of different people, that if you look at the defensive improvement over the course of the year, particularly from game 41 up to game 82, it's been pretty significant. And it's probably a good idea to keep coach, system, staff with a young group of players that you have moving forward so you can continue to build on that. The other thing that Billups has that I think every NBA coach is searching for, he's got an ability to connect with his players so that he gets the result that he desires, and that's that they play hard for him. And I think that's one of the number one goals of all NBA coaches. How do I get my guys to play hard for me? It sounds simple, but it's not. And there are a lot of coaches that struggle with this. Your players have to respect you. They have to buy in. And will they follow you? And in this case with Chauncey Billups, they do. And let's face it, first year or two, yeah, he was struggling. And there were a lot of things he was learning on the job, but he's gotten better with time. And this year, he really started to shine as a head coach. And I'm excited to see what the future is going to hold. So there you have it. I'm a big fan of the extension of Billups. If you want to share thoughts on that, 503-248-0620. Travis Demers, who is the voice of the Trailblazers, will join us coming up next. We'll get his take on the extension and on the upcoming offseason, which is going to be critical for the franchise. And you'll hear what Joe Cronin thinks about next year. Is it playoffs? You're going to find out. Sean Hyken coming in studio at 4. 503-248-0620. You can find me on social at Chad and Rip City. Travis Demers joins the Rip City Drive next. All right, Rip City Drive, and joining me right now is my former partner and my brother and someone I enjoy working with every day throughout the course of the Trailblazers season. I'm talking about the voice of your Portland Trailblazers, Travis Demerson. Trav, welcome to the show, my friend. You know you're always welcome. I can't believe another season is in the books.
Dude, the fact that we're sitting here on April 14th and it's the middle of the afternoon, you're on the radio. I don't have a game to prepare for. I've got lacrosse practice with Lincoln tonight and t-ball practice with Lawson tomorrow. And this is our new reality for the next, several months. It's weird, man. Every year it's weird because you go from go, 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 and then all of a sudden, boom, it just stops. And you're like, okay, what do I do now? And you feel like you're not doing something that you should be doing.
Yeah, I agree. Now, we got some huge news before the final game of the season against the Lakers. Chauncey Billups has agreed to an extension with the team, a multi-year deal. This coming just a few days after Joe Cronin was extended. What are your thoughts on Chauncey Billups getting re-upped after so many people thought he would not be back after this year?
Yeah, and I think those thoughts changed over the last couple of months from a lot of people, but it's not that I think it's the safe decision or a good decision. I think it's the right decision for this team. And I've seen a lot from fans that, well, Michael Malone is out there, or Taylor Jenkins is out there, Mike Brown, Mike Budenholzer now. I'm not saying that those guys aren't good coaches or that they wouldn't do well with the Trailblazers. They're different style of coaches. There's a reason that Taylor Jenkins and Michael Malone were let go. There's a reason why Mike Budenholzer was let go today. And when you have a team that has young players that have responded to a certain type of coaching and resonate with their coach, and they have very, very clearly improved and shown signs of heading in absolutely the right direction, you don't make a change just to get someone that you think might do a better job, because it's already proven that things are going the way that you want them to go. So why would you change that?
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. I mean, you know a lot of people in the NBA and guys who work for different teams, and they've told you this, and I've heard from other guys too. One of the hardest things for an NBA coach to get is for their players to consistently play hard for them. But Chauncey's got that. This group plays hard for them because they respect him. And I think that's critical in the NBA when in that relationship between player and coach.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there's a reason you look at Michael Malone, and he and the front office said we're not on the same page. And I'm not trying to throw those guys under the bus. Michael Malone won a championship 2 years ago, so it's not like he's a bad coach or anything like that. But losing the locker room or not getting along with guys, we saw earlier this year with the Knicks and Tom Thibodeau. Mikal Bridges, Mr. Iron Man, on a night that the Knicks actually were here in Portland, says, hey, Tibbs, stop playing us so much. You're running us down. There's nobody on the Blazers that is second-guessing Chauncey Billups. There are no players that are unhappy. I see these guys on a daily basis, Chad. I see their interactions with Coach. And yesterday during pregame interviews with Brooke, and I'm waiting for my opportunity to talk to Coach, guys are walking in at their normal time. They haven't seen him since the extension happened. And they're kind of sneaking under the camera, and I saw this from Anthony Simon specifically, sneaking under the camera to shake Coach's hand, and he kind of leans over and shakes his hand back. Like there's a whole lot of respect between the coaches and the players all together, and it is really hard to find that. You and I have been around this game for a long time in different ways. And I've seen different coaching staffs with different players, and this is really the first time that I've seen – and nothing against Terry Stotts. Terry was great. He got along with most of his players, but there was always one or two that, for whatever reason, things weren't completely lined up. I don't know a single guy in this team – I might be wrong, but I don't know a single guy in this team where they don't see things at least in the same way. And if they don't see them that way, they talk about it and understand each other.
Well, the biggest thing I was told basketball-wise why it's probably a good idea to keep Coach is that if you look at the numbers, and you know them specifically, but if you look at the defensive improvement, especially from midseason up until the end of the year, it's pretty substantial. So we're starting to see them turn the corner. So when you have young players who are starting to embrace and understand the defensive system, and they're starting to excel in that department, by keeping the continuity with the coaching staff, you allow those young players that you're going to be relying upon to continue to grow in that system with Coach.
Yeah, and you'll think about this, Chad. When was the last time the Blazers had a defense that was in the middle of the pack?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
For the season, they were 16th in the NBA in defensive rating this year, for the whole season. Now, is 16th in the NBA great? No, but considering how bad the defense was for the first half of the season, the fact that they jumped up from the bottom 2 or 3 to the middle of the pack tells you just how good they've been. And, you know, they were top 3 in the league since January 19th. And what I've heard from fans is that, well, look at the previous 3.5 years. Why does 3 months outweigh 3.5 years? Well, think about it in this way, and I look at it from a player's perspective. If you had a young player who really struggled and you weren't sure what this guy was going to be in his rookie year and his second year, and he didn't have a whole lot of help around him, and then got some players around him, and midway through year number 4 popped, and you all of a sudden had a lot of confidence in this guy, would you let him go, especially for nothing? No, and I feel like that's where we are with Chauncey Billups, that, yes, 41 games, it's a half of a season, it's not a huge sample size, but the things that they have done, especially on the defensive end, those are sustainable things.
Yeah, that's critical to me. And to see these guys continue to get a chance to work on that, I think it's really nice. And, you know, with Coach Billups, I mean, personally, Trav, I like him. So, and I know that has nothing to do with the job performance or the team playing better defense or being more connected on offense and sharing the basketball. But, you know, I personally wanted to see him have success and overcome the situation he was in and get the extension because I like him. He's one of the coolest guys I've been around in terms of NBA coaches.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, you know, one thing that he does not get enough credit for, and he is never going to ask for credit in this regard, is he has been the ultimate team player. He signs up for a team that has, you know, Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum, and they're expected to, you know, do good things. They're coming off of a run where they went to the playoffs 8 straight years, the most in the NBA, and he's expected, unfairly, by the way, to take the team to the next level because he was not prepared and not ready to take that team to the next level. He just wasn't as a coach, but he was asked to. And then CJ gets the collapsed lung, and then he gets traded, and Dame gets hurt, and all of this stuff happens. They were literally playing guys that have not played in the NBA since 2, 3, 4 years ago, since their 10-day contracts or 2-way contracts with the Blazers. And the win-loss record is on him. That will never change. Chauncey's win-loss record is bad. He's about 100 games under 500 in 4 years, and that's on him. But he hasn't complained about it once. The team around him, up until midway through the season or so, was not good enough to compete on a nightly level, and they got blown out in historic fashion. A couple of years ago, they had the most 25-point defeats in the history of the NBA. They're the only team to have 2 60-plus point defeats in the same season in the history of the NBA. It's not because they were trying to win basketball games, and that's not on Chauncey Billups. Unfortunately, it goes on his record, and not one time has he ever complained about it or hinted about complaining about it. He's done his job. He's done what he's been asked to, and now we're starting to see results.
We're talking with Travis Demers, voice of the Portland Trailblazers. All right, Joe Cronin's locked in. Chauncey Billups is locked in. We've got the draft lottery coming up on May 12th. Moving into the offseason, like, what's the biggest question mark, or I don't even know if that's the right way to phrase it, but what is the biggest thing that you're wondering about with this team in terms of what they need to get done before next year?
I think you've got to figure out what you're going to do with the veterans, right? And is that something that you look at it and say, when I'm referring to the veterans, Chad, I'm referring to Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons, DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams III, okay, guys that are not necessarily on the timeline as some of the younger guys or maybe play duplicate positions. You also have to see where you end up in the lottery and where you end up in the draft and before free agency and all that stuff gets there. But what are you going to do? Because if you bring back some of those guys, what does that mean for the young players who are, you know, the core of the team? And I know Anthony Simons is still a young player too, but he's the longest tenured guy on the team. He just finished up his 7th year in the league, and he's going into a contract year. DeAndre Ayton is going into a contract year. Jeremy Grant still has, some time left on his deal. Robert Williams III has struggled to get on the floor. And is he best utilized on this kind of a team? They need to figure that out. And they need to figure out which one of those players, if any, or all of them, fit what they're looking for. And if not, what is moving them worth? And the reason I say it that way, Chad, is because if the market out there, like 2 trade deadlines ago, the trade deadline of 2024, the reports were that the going rate for Malcolm Brogdon was 2 second-round picks and some filler. Now, again, I have not heard this directly from Joe Cronin or anyone. These are reports and things like that. They decided that's better to hold on to him. And they end up moving Malcolm Brogdon and a couple of picks for Denny Avdia. Turns out to be a pretty good deal. And Joe has been very patient with that. So the rate of what you can give up or what you can get back for some of these guys, I think, goes into a lot of that decision-making. And I don't think there's a single player on this roster that is addition by subtraction. I know some fans do. I don't see it that way.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the 5 guys that you just mentioned, Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams III, Matisse Thybulle, what Joe Cronin does with those 5 veterans moving forward at the time he decides to execute and try to find different deals, that's going to be a big part of his story,
yeah.
And it's going to be critical for the roster building as they continue to move forward, which I think is great. Now, of the 5 young guys that we talk about the most, Scoot, Shaden, Klingon, Avdia, and Kamara, I mean, that's kind of the foundation of the team right now. They all showed incredible improvement, but what do you think was the best story or maybe the most important jump of those 5 guys this year in your mind?
That's a hard question, Chad, because I think you can look at all of those things and say each one of those things is at the top of the list by itself, right? And like Denny Avdia turned himself into a guy that can absolutely take over and destroy you. And you look at the things that he did with triple doubles in the 30-point games. He shows no fear. His attitude and the way he plays lifts everybody. It's really it's been remarkable what he's been able to do. And then you look at Toumani Camara, who has gotten even better as a defender. And I was reading something, it was a couple of days ago from the end of last season. And it was a redraft of the previous draft. And Toumani Camara was somewhere around 16 or 17 behind guys like Anthony Black and Grady Dick. And I wouldn't take any of those guys over Toumani Camara right now. They had Scoot from 3 to 4 and Amen Thompson going 3 to the Blazers and things like that. And what the particular article that I was reading said about Toumani Camara is that he was coming off of a season where he shot 33% from 3. And if he can get that up to 35 or so and continue what he's been doing on defense, he could be a closing lineup type of player on any team in the league. Well, he got it up to 37%, and even 37% from the league to lead the team from 3, and he was an even better defender. So that in itself is huge. Stuart Henderson turned the ball over 2 times less per game, making less mistakes. He's become a much better three-point shooter, better finisher, making fewer mistakes. And then you look at Donovan Klingon. He's turned into a guy who can play 25 minutes a night, which is as important as anything. He needs to get better with his touch around the basket and some of the screening fouls and things like that he does. But all of those things, Chad, they're all really super important things. And then there's Shaden Sharp, who I think could be one of the most important players in all of this, because you heard what Chauncey said yesterday that, maybe, like when Giannis or SGA or Jokic were young, they were not MVPs. Nobody expected anywhere near that from those guys, and it took them years to develop. I'm not saying that Shaden can be an MVP. That might be a bit ambitious. But you're telling me Shaden can't be a 25, 27-point-a-night guy? He shot 31% from 3 this year. That's awful. That needs to get back up to where he was his rookie year. Get back up to 35, 36%. He's gotten better at getting to the rim, getting fouled. The fadeaway is automatic. So all of those things, I think you could look at each one of those things and say, that's the best thing about this team this year.
That's great. We got the lottery coming up on May 12th. What are you hoping for there? Like maybe you get a fortunate jump into the top 4. I mean, the Blazers are going to have like a 3.7% chance at number 1, but what would be an ideal outcome aside from the obvious, which is landing Cooper Flag?
Well, I think all of the teams behind them move up and they draft the 14th. How's that sound? No. That'd be awful. Well, obviously, look, if you don't move up to the top 4, which, what do you say, 15%, somewhere in that ballpark?
I think it's like 17.3 since they're splitting those odds with the Suns.
Right. Okay. So it's, a 1 in 7 chance of moving up into the top 4, which really isn't that bad, right? And obviously you want to get number 1. You want to have the opportunity to draft Cooper Flag. But it's a very small percentage. It can happen, of course. But if that doesn't happen, I think you want to stay put. The coin flip has yet to happen. So best case scenario, if they don't move up, you stay there at number 9. And just like last year, hope the guy that you wanted all along, with the exception of Cooper Flag, drops to you in that spot.
Yeah, Klingon was a guy they wanted. They were thrilled to get Donovan Klingon, and look how he turned out. I thought he had a great finish to his rookie season, Trav, especially with all the playing time he got with Williams and Ayton out of the lineup.
Yeah, he did, and nobody was really talking about him in the Rookie of the Year conversation, but if you look at a lot of the rookie rankings at the end of the year, I saw him as high as number 2 and as low as number 4. So he was a top, 4 or 5 rookie essentially this year for a number 7 pick, where bigs traditionally, especially at 20 years old and at his size, have a hard time adjusting to the NBA. And he really wasn't starting until the last 25 games or so. He ended up starting 37 and coming off of the bench for 30. So all of those things for him, everything's pointed in the right direction. And he works hard.
All right, before you go, I heard you mention something to someone. I overheard you talking to someone about your son playing lacrosse. And you said that was a disappointment. What is it? What is your what's your story with lacrosse? I need to know.
Well, so some of it's just hyperbole and for fun, right? Where I grew up on the East Coast, lacrosse was the biggest sport. And lacrosse players and baseball players didn't exactly get along, okay? Like the Mid-Atlantic lacrosse player is not the same guy as West Coast lacrosse player. Mid-Atlantic lacrosse player is, upper white collar, somebody who's going to go to an Ivy League school or Johns Hopkins or Duke or one of those places, and they just have this smugness about them, okay? And we all know people like that. But that's what, lacrosse player in the Mid-Atlantic region is like. And lacrosse players and baseball players, it's the same season, and lacrosse players would call baseball players, wusses, and baseball players would say to lacrosse players that, you only play lacrosse because you couldn't hit a curveball, and there's a rivalry there, and all that stuff's, high school drama and BS. So that's the hyperbole of it. Do I really care in that regard about my son being a lacrosse player? No, I just don't want him to be a smug douche like the guys that I grew up with.
Now, your alma mater, LIU, do they have a lacrosse team that's really good?
So they just moved up to D1 a few years ago, and when I was there, they won the national championship in men's and women's lacrosse. Yeah. So Long Island is a hotbed of lacrosse. If you look at the professional teams, at least half the players in the entire league are from Long Island for outdoor lacrosse. Box lacrosse, they're all Canadians with a couple of American guys in there. But the other thing, too, Chad, is that being a baseball guy like I am, I want to coach my kid in baseball. And if he's not playing baseball, then I can't coach him.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, is Quentin Post of the Warriors related to the family that owns your college where you went?
That's a great question.
I need to know if he's part of that Post family, the cereal family. Is that what it was? LIU, the Post family owned that school.
Well, so the campus that I went to was originally the home of Marjorie Merriweather Post, who was the daughter of Charles William Post, the founder of Post cereal, even though he ripped the concept off from Kellogg. And he died. She took over the company and basically created a General Foods company and was I think she was the most wealthy woman in the world at one point.
Wow.
And upon her passing, she donated the land and the estate to what became C.W. Post College, which was eventually the C.W. Post campus of Long Island University, and now it's LIU Post, one of the campuses. So, it essentially came from the Post cereal family. But I don't think he is, because he's Dutch.
Okay.
And I don't know if he was born in Amsterdam, so I don't know if there's any lineage there.
All right, that's that takes care of that. I was just curious. I love the name Post. It always reminds me of your school. But Trav, hey man, I just want to tell you that I thank you for the opportunity to work with you throughout the course of the season on the Trailblazer broadcast. You know this, man. I love you. You're my brother, and I had a blast, man. That's all I can say is that it was stimulating, it was fun, and I love the people that we have a chance to work with during the games. It's the best.
Yeah, and I know we're probably running super long here, Chad, but I love you like a brother, and we work so well together. What people don't see is that when I'm on the air, I'm very fidgety, right? And I knock stuff over, and you're right there to pick it up for me sometimes. Or if my voice is going, you'll pick up the slack and read things for me. In addition to all the stuff that you're already doing for your job. And you always have my back. You always have Michael's back and Cap's back and Curtis's back and Travis Clinton's back. You're awesome, man. I wouldn't want to do it without you.
No, it's the best. And by the way, props to you for enjoying the end of your season last night by taking in one of my favorite movies, The Fugitive, man. What a great film that is.
I don't care.
You sent me that picture where he's standing right there in the tunnel, hovering over the dam, and he's like, I don't care. I didn't kill my wife. It's such a great scene.
Switch the sample.
All right, Trav. Well, enjoy the beginning of your off season, and I look forward to it because I know that we'll probably be doing a draft party together coming up in June.
I can't wait, brother. Thanks, Chad.
All right, always a pleasure to catch up with Mr. Travis Demers, the voice of your Trailblazers, and he's transitioning now into the off season.
Fugitive's always a good pull.
Have you seen the movie?
Oh, of course. I'm the person that even thinks the sequel, U.S. Marshals, is still decent.
Oh, that's a great film with Snipes.
Yeah.
The original Fugitive, I remember seeing it in the theater when it came out. That is one of my favorite movies of all time. Harrison Ford is phenomenal. Phenomenal. And Tommy Lee Jones is great. Well, that's a good film. That is a terrific way to end your basketball season. All right, we'll keep things rolling. We're going to talk with PGA David Coleman at 5:20 and get his take on the Masters. We got our man Sean Highkin, our Trailblazer Insider, who will be in studio coming up at 4. You want to reach out to me at Chad and Rip City, telephone number 503-248-0620. We're going to hear from Coach Billups and Joe Cronin on the new extension for Coach coming up next on the Rip City Drive. I really was pulling for Bryson yesterday, but the reality is his iron play throughout the course of the tournament just wasn't good enough to get the job done. His short game was on point, and he was great off the tee, but his iron play, not good enough, and Roy was spectacular at times. And he had his struggles, too. Like, there were a couple of times yesterday where I thought, okay, he's going to melt down. And he bounced back, and now he's got the career Grand Slam. What a great tournament that was. It was terrific. And even with Rose, I thought he was almost certainly going to falter after the, first round when he was the leader. And he did. He fell back, but then he bounced back and put himself in a position to win. So credit to Roy McIlroy. I'm just not a McIlroy fan. Not a fan of McIlroy. I do like Bryson, and I was pulling for him, but he just didn't have enough. And Roy had a couple of, massive shots in that final round. That is a great golf tournament. That is my favorite golf tournament, but that course is amazing, and it's tough. And those greens are fast, slippery, and always set up really challenging on, the final day of the tournament. PGA David Coleman going to join us coming up at 5:20. I want you to hear a couple of bites. We got Sean Highkin coming up here at 4 o'clock. He's going to join me in studio, and we'll touch on all things Trailblazers. But Coach Billups yesterday at the press conference before the game was asked about getting a new deal. Let's take a listen.
I just felt very good about where we're at, and I now understand how long it takes to build a culture. And I feel like we've done that. I think the telltale of that for any coach is if you're at some point when your team kind of takes on your personality and how you believe the game should be played, I think that you've gotten there, and I believe that our team has done that with me, and the entire time, I've been just saying, you never know when that's going to happen. You never know when your team is going to take the leap. You never know if the team will take the leap. And I just felt like we took some big strides this year, and had a lot to do with, the staff, and what we've done. But obviously, there's so much speculation, and this game, again, it's very fragile, so my people, and you hear everything, that I wasn't supposed to last through half of the season this year, and maybe we don't go on that run. Who knows? You just never know, But I just had so much growing to do last year when they could have picked up that extension, and there was still things they needed to learn about me that they ended up learning, and it just all worked out. I just always believe you can't control fate, and what's going to happen is what's supposed to happen is going to, and this is what was supposed to happen, and I'm very, very happy about it.
He's happy. He's very casual. I like Chauncey Billups in his demeanor. And he just said, hey, I had a lot to learn, and they could have picked up the option. They didn't, so I just continue to work, which is terrific. Now, Joe Cronin did talk about the data. One issue they had after last season with all the injuries, not a lot of data on the players that they had. But this year, a different story with guys being able to play with health throughout the course of the season, and Joe talked about that yesterday.
The previous season, there were so many random injuries and random roster weirdness. We talked about this. We didn't get a lot of data from the previous season. This year, I felt like we got a ton of data. Right. What's working, what isn't, what skill sets do we need to add, what types of personalities do we need to add. We learned a lot about our roster this year. Do we have all the answers yet? No. Are we still learning? Yes. Still the second youngest team in the league, still have a lot to learn about and see from our young players and how these veterans fit in with them. So the approach, though, I think we can definitely be more diligent about the specific type of player that we're adding. And I love that we're at that stage where, as a front office, we don't feel that pressure to keep taking swing after swing to try and hit on the next up-and-coming guy. I think we're starting to feel really comfortable with our talent base that we can be more diligent about adding specific types of guys.
So what we're going to get to once we get Sean in here is we're going to hear from Joe talking about the playoffs, and we'll also hear from Coach Billups talking about, the relationship, the bond that exists between those two. But there you have it. Both guys are locked in. So the Blazers now, coaching staff-wise, front office-wise, are set. So now they move into the offseason. We know who the coach is going to be. We know who the GM is going to be. And we know who the key players are on the roster. So now it's a matter of, continuing to reshape this in the image that they have in mind. And how do they get that done? All right, when we come back, Sean Highkin, Rose Garden Report, going to join me in studio here on the Rip City Drive.
what you need to know. From the Goldberg Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
All right, the Trailblazers season is over after yesterday's win over the Lakers. They finished up the year 36-46. Prior to the game, the Trailblazers agreed on a multi-year contract extension with head coach Chauncey Billups. It's exit interview day here on the Rip City Drive. Sean Hike and Rose Garden Report will join me in studio coming up in just a couple of moments. He is our Trailblazer insider. We're going to recap the Masters at 5:20 with David Coleman. The Phoenix Suns have fired head coach Mike Budenholzer. He was let go 1 year into a 5-year, $50 million contract. The New Orleans Pelicans have fired general manager David Griffin. And Luka's number 77 is the number one selling jersey in the NBA. The play-in tournament will kick off tomorrow. It starts with the Hawks at the Magic at 4:30, followed by the Grizzlies at the Warriors. The winner of that game will meet the Rockets in round one of the Western Conference playoffs. Both games tomorrow on TNT. Rip City Drive with Chad Doing continues next. Sean Hyken in studio.
The home of the OSAA is 620 Rip City Radio.
I'm on.
And just like that, it's over, Sean. Like the last day of school, we're there covering games. And then yesterday around 4 o'clock, Moda Center was empty, and I felt like I was leaving school for the final time.
Yeah, and then there's some off-season stuff. Like we're going to have pre-draft workouts to cover. I'm going to Chicago in about a month for the draft lottery, and then, going to Vegas for Summer League. So that's kind of when the equivalent of like, you see your teacher at the like supermarket or something, as opposed to, you're going to see them every day. You might run into them once in a while. You're going to be in the same place sometimes, but yeah, it's definitely the quiet part of the calendar.
Well, I had a lot of fun with you over the last week and a half to 2 weeks talking about Chauncey Billups and wondering what may or may not happen. And just as we thought, with everything that we saw, all the tea leaves, right, where the Blazers put out that very pro Chauncey Billups video on their YouTube page, which talked about his coaching and his experience so far with the Trailblazers with Lamar Hurd. And then we knew based on the lineup with the exit interviews that more than likely news would have to be made of some sort, whether they were going to part ways with Coach Billups or that he was going to be signed to a new extension because they didn't have anything lined up after yesterday. And we got the news yesterday morning that Chauncey Billups had agreed to a contract extension. What was your initial reaction to that news?
I was actually a little bit surprised that it happened yesterday. Like I thought that they were going to say first of all, we thought that that Joe was going to talk after the game.
Yeah.
And so I was expecting, us to ask Joe whether Chauncey was going to be back, and they were going to say something like, we're going to sit down over the next couple of days to talk about it. And then you would start to hear these leaks that, because, Phoenix just fired Budenholzer today. I was expecting that there would be these leaks that, Shams would be like, sources say Chauncey Billups is a top target for the Blazers job or for the head coaching job in Phoenix. And then there would either, then there would be like a week where, he gets permission to interview with whoever. And then, one way or the other, he would either take that job or the Denver job if they decided not to go with Adelman, or he would stay here and the whole thing would just be a leverage thing. And so I even thinking over the last week that there was a chance that he would be back more than I did earlier in the year, I still didn't think there was just going to be such a clean resolution to it yesterday where they announce it in the morning and then Joe and Chauncey do their press conference together before the game. And that's just it. Like, over the next couple of weeks, you and I were just talking about this being the last day of school and everything kind of slowing down. I thought I was either going to be covering a coaching search right now or covering, they're negotiating. Are they going to get a deal done? When are they going to get a deal done? How many years is the deal going to get done? But no, it's done. He's going to be back for at least the next few years.
What do you think was the key turning point for Coach Billups to get in a position to where he's now got a new contract extension with the Trailblazers?
Well, it was the second half of the season, right? It was, starting with that January 19th win over the Bulls where he pulls Shaedon Sharpe from the starting lineup, talks about how it's because he hasn't been good defensively. And then, they start, that's when they start the 10 wins, the 10-1 stretch over that next 11 games. And then, Shaden ends up responding to that. So it's like, okay, clearly he was pushing the right buttons. Kind of did the same thing with Scoot at different points over the year. And then, you saw Denny Avdia break out over that time and talk about how Chauncey put him in positions to succeed. And really, honestly, if you go back further than that, really the first clue that this might have been the way it ends up going was after that Memphis game that we've talked about so many times, where Chauncey, in his press conference afterwards, he said some stuff that we can't repeat on the radio, but then he also said basically that he told the team that if any of you sleep well tonight, you're a loser. We thought, you and I both thought there was a chance that he might be fired that week, but then the fact that they won their next 2 games against Minnesota, and then they had 3 days off, and then they won their next game after that against Atlanta. So you win, you have that, the easily the worst loss of the season, and the coach basically just destroys you guys in front of the media afterwards, and then you have that response to it. That, in retrospect, maybe could have been a sign of like, okay, Chauncey still got something here with these guys.
Yeah, I remember you telling me after the back-to-back wins against Minnesota that you're like, hey, he still got their ear. Because you were surprised, not that they won one game against Minnesota, but you thought going into the second game that they would lose that one, and they bounced back and won that one. And that's where I remember you telling me after the game, like, he still got their attention. That's a good sign if you're a coach.
Well, I think winning the first one saved his job for the season. Once they won that first one, I don't think they were going to fire him during the season. I think that at that point, worst case scenario would have been today they announced that they mutually parted ways.
Yeah.
But once they won both of them, and then it's like, okay, this is clearly this one day was just a blip, and this was just one bad day out of however many days the season had been at that point.
Well, here are the numbers, courtesy of Tom Habistro, on the second half of the season, and I'll give you the first half numbers to give you perspective. So, if you look at what they were able to do on offense, first half of the season, games 1 through 41, 27th in offensive rating. Through the second half of the season, games 42 up to 81, they were 28th, they were 12th in offensive rating. So that's pretty good. That's a big improvement. Now, defensively, they were 28th and then jumped to 3rd in the second half of the season, which is unheard of in these parts over the last few years to be that good defensively. Now, normally over a 5 or 10 game stretch, I don't put much weight into, that type of a trend. But when you give me half of a season, I'm not going to base all my decisions off of a half of a season. But at least when you have 41 games to work with, you can look at that as a sample size and think that's fairly legitimate.
Yeah, and to your point about not putting too much stock in it, I still don't know if I'm looking at that second half of the season and being like, okay, this is going to be a top 5 defensive team next season. Like,
exactly.
I think the what they actually are is probably somewhere in the middle, but they truly did change. And Chauncey talked about this yesterday at the press conference that at one point he sat the whole team down and said, anybody who isn't playing defense, anybody who isn't competing on that end, I'm just not going to play you. And everybody kind of took that to heart. And that's when you saw, Shaden kind of change his approach on that end, Scoot. And then, Denny and Tumani, you never really had to worry about the effort on that end. But, putting those two in the starting lineup together really unlocked some things on that end. I think that I don't know if I'm going to come in here and say, oh, yeah, next year with this group, they're going to be a top 5 defensive team the whole season, because it's a pretty extreme swing going from a bottom 3 team in the league on that end to a top 3 team in the league on that end. I think the truth is probably somewhere closer to the middle. But even just being a league average defense over the course of a season compared to what they've been the last few years, like that alone is enough of an improvement that you can feel like, okay, maybe it's not a complete picture yet, but they're building towards something.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know this as well as I do. If you're sitting somewhere between 10 and 15th in the league defensively, you can win a lot of games playing that way, because that means you're doing a lot of things right instead of being in the almost dead last for multiple seasons in a row,
Right. And I mean, you can get away with being a bad defensive team if you have like one of the best offenses of all time, which like I don't know how a team off the top of my head, but there are teams that are elite offensively, and then that's enough to carry them over as far as like you can get away with, making up for some things defensively. The Blazers weren't that either as far as, They don't have, that number one scorer. They don't, their offense is still pretty, up and down. Some of these guys are, Shaden kind of came on the second half of the season, but he wasn't consistent the whole season. Scoot obviously wasn't consistent the whole season. He came on the second half of the year. So if their offense is going to be kind of shaky or is kind of going to kind of be up and down, the defense had better be elite to compensate for that. And
Absolutely.
I think that's really what is responsible for a lot of what happened in the second half.
How much do you think player development, the young guys, and the way that they continue to improve and get better? And I think we can say that with confidence that whether it's Scoot or Shaden or the play of Denny or Tamani or even Donovan Clingan in his rookie year, if you look at those five, the development of those five, how much do you think that factored into the decision to bring him back along with the improvements they made in the second half of the season?
Well, I think it's huge because a more important thing for the future of this franchise than whether Chauncey is the coach or somebody else is the coach is those guys, because these are the guys that they've been selling to fans for however many years as, Scoot Henderson. And, we drafted Scoot Henderson third overall. That basically led to the end of the Damian Lillard era. But this is our guy going forward. Shaden Sharp, seventh overall pick, really exciting rookie year. Didn't play much last year because of injury, but we still think he's the guy. If those two guys don't hit, like if Scoot doesn't have the second half of the season that he had,
Yeah.
I don't know if Chauncey is sitting where he is right now with a new contract, because the most of his rookie season and then also a lot of the first half of this season was still pretty rough for him. So if I don't know, I think with Scoot making the leap that he's like, now we're not like questioning like, oh, is this guy even like an NBA starter anymore? Like we're not asking those questions about Scoot anymore. There's a new baseline for him, and I think that's going from where it was at the beginning of the season to where it is now. I think you do have to. I'm not in on practices. I don't know who's doing what or who's instructing who on what, but you can't give, you can land wherever you want to land on whether this extension for Chauncey was a good idea. You can't give him and his staff zero credit for some of this development that's happened.
I heard Chauncey in his press conference yesterday reference the fact that, hey, I wasn't even supposed to be here past the midway point of the season. So I'm assuming that he knew what we knew, right? That they didn't pick up the extension. They got rid of a couple of his assistant coaches. He probably went into the season thinking that this was probably going to be his last season in Portland, didn't he?
I think everybody thought that this was going to be his last season in Portland. I don't think they didn't pick up the option. If they wanted to, a year ago they could have picked up the option and said like, we're going to at least, make sure, there's no speculation about it. They could have done that if they wanted to. They didn't. There was all that stuff going on last year about, was Phoenix interested? Did they reach out to interview? Was Kevin Durant pushing for him? Did Chauncey want to leave? Like, was he happy? Does he want the extent? Did he want them to pick up his option? Or, there was all that stuff. At any point, they could have said, no, this is our guy. We're going to pick up the option. We're going to just take all this, speculation off the table. They never did that. And all the they changed out a couple of his assistants. They let Scott Brooks go. They let his brother Rodney go. Brought in a couple of new assistants. But those guys were all here on one-year deals. This wasn't like, oh, we're just going to revamp the staff, but this is a long-term commitment. They were all just there on one-year deals. This was just, let's, shake up some things with the staff. Let's see how it goes. It was kind of a prove. And now we now know Joe was in the last year of his deal, too. So for both of them, it was kind of a prove-it year. And really the second half of this season was like, okay, let's just, we've seen enough. This was the best case scenario for a prove-it year where everybody showed enough growth that, it made, Joe and Chauncey and ownership feel like, okay, we're comfortable moving forward together.
They both seemed pretty happy at the press conference yesterday.
Well, they got extra job security. Who doesn't want that?
All right, we'll keep things rolling. We'll come back, and when we do, we're going to hear from both Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups. Sean Hyken, Rose Garden Report, our Trailblazer Insider, is in studio, and then we'll get to your phone calls as well. So if you're on hold, stay there. This is an exit interview for Sean Hyken as we kind of break down how things went and where they move on from here, which is the most important question. You got the Rip City Drive. All right, Sean Hyken in studio, our Trailblazer insider, as we work through Sean's exit interview. Your telephone number is 503-248-0620. Let's go out to the phones. George in Portland's got a question about the team. Hey, George, I appreciate the phone call. You're up with Chad Doing and Sean Hyken. What's on your mind?
Yes, if you took names out of it and you told me that the Blazers had fired Chauncey Billups and the guy they hired to replace him was a guy whose career record had 100 losses more than he had won, and his best season that he ever posted was 10 games under 500, you would probably tell me, that's the best they can do? Yet here we are, the Blazers are trying to sell us this bill of goods.
Well, I appreciate the phone call, George. Where do you come out on the record? I mean, clearly, Chauncey Billups' win-loss record is brutal.
It's not good.
It's not good at all.
And even after this 500 finish to the second half of the season, it's still not good.
No, he's got a bad win-loss record. What I want to know is, with teams around the NBA, do they look at the win-loss record and say it is what it is, or do they look into why the win-loss record is what it is? Meaning, do they look at the situation in Portland and say, look, yes, his win-loss record is bad, but he also took over a team that changed GMs and shifted total direction of the franchise into a rebuild. And as a result, they went through a couple of tank seasons, and he collected a number of losses because of that. How do teams look at that?
I think this is where, and, to the caller's point, if you remove the names from it and, just looked at it like that, then, you could come to that conclusion. But I think this is where it is important to keep the names in mind because, you look at coaches that have kind of similar records, and the two examples that I pointed to in the column that I wrote after the announcement were Brett Brown, who was the Sixers coach during the whole process thing there about 10 years ago, and Steven Silas, who was the coach of the Rockets a few years ago before they hired Ime Udoka. Both of them had similar coaching records. If you look at their records to, what Chauncey has had over 4 seasons, neither of them have gotten another head coaching job since then, and neither of them are probably ever going to get a head coaching job again because, their record is what their record is. But also neither of them are Hall of Fame players who are, as universally respected in the NBA as Chauncey is. And there's enough people behind, with teams. I mean, we know, we talked about this earlier, Phoenix, I think, was very interested in him if he had come on the market. Like, there are people that feel like, he got dealt a bad hand a lot of the way with what happened over the last 4 years, and he has grown into the job, and he will continue to grow into the job. And I think we were talking, even before we knew he was going to be back, we were talking about even if they decided to let him go, he was going to get another job somewhere. It just so happens that the job that he got somewhere after these 4 years was staying with the team that he was already with.
Yeah, so Chauncey's got a big name because he's Chauncey Billups. But, and you know this because you know people outside of Portland, I think it's hard for some Blazer fans who don't have a real connection to Billups and they just look at the win-loss record or they don't like the circumstances in which he was hired and they want him out of here. But everyone I know, like in Denver or around the league, everyone respects Chauncey, and he's revered in other places. Not in Portland, but in other places he's revered and respected.
Really everywhere but Portland.
Yeah.
Especially Denver, especially Detroit, because those are the two places that Denver's where he's from. Detroit is where he won a championship and was finals MVP. Like, that's always going to be a thing. But, he's also, because he played for so many different teams in his career, and, so many of the people that he played with are now in, like, positions of power that, he has a lot of, he's somebody that has a lot of allies.
There's no question. I mean, don't you think with NBA coaches that part of the battle is just getting players to play hard for you? A certain effort level, a certain commitment. And that's something that Chauncey Billups has. Just like you mentioned with the response after the early season loss to Memphis, or the way that this team really battled down the stretch, he clearly has a way to get guys to play hard for him because they respect him.
Well, the example that I'll point to, and it's kind of, it's funny, it's a game that the Blazers were involved in, but I'm kind of talk about the other team here. When the Nuggets fired Michael Malone a week ago, I read all the after the fact reporting that, like, ESPN had one, The Athletic had one. Both of them pointed to the game here, like a couple weeks beforehand, which was the game that the Nuggets didn't have Jokic, but they got blown out. And then afterwards, I wasn't in that press conference for Michael Malone because I was dealing with Blazer stuff. But apparently it was pretty similar to some of the stuff that Chauncey said after the Memphis game. And both of these articles kind of pointed to that, and the fact that the team didn't really respond to that as like proof that they had just kind of tuned him out. Whereas when Chauncey said that stuff, the players listened and the players were like, okay, we can't let that happen again. And then they responded.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
Here are the comments from Michael Malone that became headlines. And this is the game after the loss in Portland. Here's Coach Malone.
I think each guy's got to look themselves in the mirror and start coming to each respective game with the proper mindset and have some pride. I didn't think we played with any pride tonight.
How do you feel like they took that?
I really care. It's not my job to evaluate how they take things. My job is to be honest, and sometimes brutally honest. And tonight, it was a brutally honest message. And the guys that are full of shit won't hear it. They'll say Coach is tripping. And the guys that maybe do really care will, because they're not going to go back and watch their minutes, because nobody watches their minutes. Nobody watches film. So we'll have to show them the film. And I said, if somebody disagrees with me, please speak up. And nobody said a word. So, again, I'm not really concerned with how they took that message. My thing is being honest with how we just played. Just got blown out in L.A. Come here against a team that is down 3, 4, 5 starters, and you mess around with the game. That's what happens, and that's exactly what happened tonight. And the same thing that's been bothering us of late that I talked about pregame, the turnovers, the rebounding, was even worse tonight. And I didn't think it could get any worse, but it did.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the difference between Coach Malone and Coach Billups is that the players in Denver have heard that voice for an extended period of time, and they started to tune it out.
Yeah. And then, 2 weeks later, he got fired, whereas Chauncey said pretty similar stuff in that clip to, after the Memphis game, and then the players responded. So,
yeah. And I would guess, based on what I know, that Billups is probably less abrasive to be around over the course of a season than Coach Malone. And I'm not criticizing Coach Malone. He's very successful and a good coach, and he's won a championship. But once players tune you out, you're done.
Yeah, and I also think there's a level of it, and this is a total cliche, and this doesn't always apply. But when you're delivering a message like that, I think it's probably going to be better received by a lot of players if it's coming from a coach who is a former player himself, and especially one that has accomplished as much as Chauncey did in his playing career. Like, that message is going to be a little different than, it being, a guy like Michael Malone who, is just, a lifetime coach who's obviously a great coach, but like when it's a former player, like it's going to land a little bit differently a lot of the time.
All right, I want to play this and get your reaction to it. Here's Joe Cronin at the press conference yesterday talking about expectations as they move forward. Take a listen.
Moving forward, the playoffs are definitely a goal of ours. Like, this is what we're working towards. Like, the steps we took these second half of the season, okay, now we got to take this to the next level. Like, we're not happy about our season ending today. We don't want our season to end this time next year. Like, we need to keep moving forward. We'll get through these, see how the draft goes, see how trades and free agency go, and then start talking about what's realistic.
Would you expect that your floor has been raised to a point where that should be kind of the expectation? The floor would be postseason?
I think that's a reasonable expectation, assuming our guys keep getting better, assuming we do our jobs and keep adding talent to this roster. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be competitive, in that regard.
Were you surprised that he went postseason talk yesterday?
I was a little bit, because in the time since, I mean, you go back to, before the Damian Lillard stuff happened, Joe was so forward and so, I guess, transparent kind of to a fault about, like, our plan is to push all our chips in and make a big trade. And then when that didn't happen, it kind of blew up in his face. Since then, he's been a lot more measured. But, put it this way. I mean, he said it. He just said, that's pretty unambiguous. He did try to couch it a little bit with, like, we'll see how this transaction window goes. We'll see how development goes. But he said, we don't want our season to end this time next year. He said the playoffs are definitely a goal of ours. He said that it was a reasonable expectation that they're competing for the playoffs. He said it. So now going into next season, that's going to be how they're judged. And if they don't, at least make the play in next season, we're going to judge their season as a disappointment, because that's the expectations that they put out there, and they put it on themselves. There's actually another clip, Chad, that I want you to play from that if you have it, or if you don't, we can just talk about it. But Chauncey's response when I forget who it was. I think it was Quick that asked about whether they have enough, what they have to do to get a number one guy on the roster. I want you to play Chauncey's response because this is the one thing I think both of them did pretty well yesterday in the press conference. This was the one thing that kind of made my eyebrow raise up a little. I don't know if you have that clip, you should play it.
I don't think I have it on me. At least I don't think I do. I have it, but not ready to play right now. But we'll get to that. But I like the fact that he said that. Now we kind of have an expectation. Yeah. And I don't think it's unreasonable to think that this group could compete for postseason play next season. What that means, I'm not talking about a top 3 seed in the West, but
play-in should be reasonable expectation.
Absolutely.
That would be where I land on that.
Yeah. So, and again, what level depends on what they're able to accomplish this summer, obviously.
Right.
If you get Cooper Flag,
right,
the expectation is we're going to be competitive in the Western Conference next year.
So much hinges on what happens in the lottery because if they jump up into the top 4, then suddenly, now you're talking about a different level of talent that you can get. If you stay where you're at with the 9th or the 10th pick or whatever it ends up being, then, the whatever impact roster changes that they make are going to be more with trades than with anything else. So I don't think you can really speculate that much on anything that might or might not happen with the roster until you get past the lottery and where they're picking and whether we're talking about are they going to draft Cooper Flag or Dylan Harper or VJ Edgecombe, or if we're talking about Derek Queen, Asa Newell. It's a different level of talent that you're looking at.
The only downside to yesterday, Phoenix lost, Portland won.
Yeah.
So now they're going to split the odds for that number 9th spot.
Yeah, and at some point in the next couple weeks, they're going to flip a coin to determine who's technically 9th and who's technically 10th. So that's like 1 or 2 extra lottery combinations.
Yeah, so here's how it works right now with the odds split. Phoenix, before the coin toss, has a 17.3% chance to move up into the top 4, 3.8% chance at the number 1 pick. Portland, right now, 16.9% chance to move into the top 4, 3.7% chance to get the number 1 pick. So it's unfortunate that they wound up with the same record as Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers didn't play any of their guys last night, so you can't really, that stuff is always a crapshoot with playing, against a team that doesn't have anything to play for because the Lakers had already locked up their playoff seed.
All right, let's take a listen to what Coach Billups talking about his relationship, the bond with him and Joe Cronin.
I tell you what, we've learned a ton, and we've had to learn it together. And we sit in that office sometimes, sitting there shaking our head like, man, this is tough. It's not easy, and the fragility of this position, we know it's crazy. So for us to be sitting here today saying, it's been 3 really tough years. This year, to me, hasn't been a tough year. It's been up and down, but it hasn't been tough. It's been a great year in my eyes. But for us to be sitting here saying, all right, we're moving on, let's keep going. It literally means to me that Jody and Bert and them see a lot of promise in us, and when the rest of the league and most of the league is moving and shaking and doing what they're doing, we're sitting here saying, all right, we're in a good spot. Let's just kind of keep going on this progress and keep progressing through. But it's an honor, it's not easy anymore in this league to be with one team for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I mean, it's almost rare at this point. So it just lets us know what they think about us, and I'm happy about it.
Well, I guess good news here is that unlike Denver, you have a good relationship between GM and coach here. That's a good thing.
I mean, I used to cover the Bulls, and I was there for when they fired Thibodeau, and I just remember how toxic that relationship got between him and Gar Forman and John Paxson by the end. So I've seen it be not. And honestly, even here, I think by the end, Terry Stotts and Neil Olshey's relationship had kind of deteriorated a little bit. So it's definitely not a common thing that. But you know what? One thing that I think is interesting about this about them getting these new deals at the same time, and I'm certainly a lot of that came from ownership, but Joe, and we've made this point a million times. Joe Cronin did not hire Chauncey Billups. Neil Olshey hired Chauncey Billups. Joe was in the front office, and I'm sure he was involved in the interview process, the decision making, and whatever in some order. But that was Neil's call. Neil was the one that was like, Chauncey Billups is my guy. That's who we're hiring. And so it would have been very easy. Now Joe got the job permanently after, Neil gets fired. Now he got this extension. Now he's got some runway. He's got the job security. He's pretty much, except for Anthony Simons, he's cleaned out the roster of anybody that Neil Olshey had anything to do with. It would have been very easy this week for Joe to say, okay, Chauncey, we love what you did the second half of the season. I think it's best for everybody to move on. I want to hire my own coach because I have not had a chance to hire my own coach as a general manager. They could have done that. That's usually like 99% of cases. That is what the GM does. If the GM didn't hire the coach, eventually the GM is going to want to hire his own coach. Joe didn't do that. They have now recommitted to Chauncey. So now, the way I've been writing it and the way I've been saying it is now Chauncey Billups is Joe Cronin's coach because he was the one that decided, okay, I don't want to explore the market. I want to recommit to this guy and keep going with this guy. So now, like, if it regresses or the Chauncey thing goes south, now it's going to be a reflection on Joe in a way that maybe it wasn't, before because he was Neil's guy.
All right, when we come back, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take phone calls. So if you're on hold, stay there. And I'm going to find that clip that Sean was referencing from Coach Billups on what it's going to take to become a postseason team. And if you want to jump on board, you can find Sean on social at Hyken. You'll find me there at Chad and Rip City or call 503-248-0620. It's Sean Hyken's exit interview, our Trailblazer insider from Rose Garden Report here on the Rip City Drive. All right, I found the clip that Sean Highkin was talking about. We'll get to that, but we got some people that want to communicate. 503-248-0620. Sean Highkin, our Trailblazer insider from Rose Garden Report, is in studio. So if you want to ask a question, you can jump on board right now. Let's go out to the phones. Let's start with Pat, who's in Portland. Pat, appreciate the phone call. You're up on the Rip City Drive with Chad Doing and Sean Highkin. What's on your mind?
Hey, guys. Nice to hear your voice again, and I think you both did an outstanding job to paint a picture for us people out here in the community, especially me being blind. I really enjoyed this season. It was awesome. But I wanted to find out, what position do you guys think we really need to get a little bit more support in that we can really get over the hump next year? Or what free agent might be coming out that we're not aware of? Because I know that list. I don't know if it's out there anywhere or not, but I'd like to know who could we pick up in free agent? Because I'm not knowing what we may be able to trade. I don't know how good our guys are to really get somebody that really would benefit helping us.
All right, appreciate that phone call, Pat. I'll start with you, Sean. In terms of position on the team, what position on the Trailblazers do you think could use some bolstering?
I think, with the Anthony Simons thing kind of being up in the air, and Scoot has certainly made some leaps, but I don't, is he your long-term number one starter? I think more depth at the point guard position. I don't know. I don't know necessarily if they need to get another starter level guy. I think it's more, ideally your long-term starting five is Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, Denny Avdia, Tumani Kamara, Donovan Clingan. But I do think that the point guard position they could use a little bit more depth at, especially if they decide to move on for Anthony Simons this summer.
If they were to get fortunate and jump into the top 4 of the NBA draft, could they look at a point guard potentially if they're in the top 4?
I mean, like Dylan Harper or
Yeah.
VJ, who's a little bit more of a wing. I don't think you can not take the best player available still at this point for the Blazers. I don't think they're in a position where they can just say, oh, well, we think this guy might be the most talented player in the draft, but he already plays the same position as so-and-so. I don't think that's where they are.
Okay, so point guard depth, probably the number one to look at in terms of what this roster needs. Let's go out to Dan in Northeast. Dan, appreciate the phone call. You're on with Chad Doing and Sean Highkin. What's on your mind?
Oh, man, just wanted to chime in and say that I'm generally happy with both of the moves. The reality is coaching isn't the problem with this team or what's holding us back. And we are so far away as a team from a place where of the X's and O's of a coach are going to matter in terms of holding this team back. If we were look at the Stotts era, for example, not saying that we need to get rid of Stotts, but if you're in a situation where you've got a clearly established ceiling and you're like, boy, just substitutions seem out of whack, we just can't seem to get to the second round, it's a different scenario. But when you watch the playoffs this postseason and you look at how far ahead teams like the Thunder and the Rockets are, that's not the priority right now. The priority should be with the team that's young. Coach that gets their guys to play defense and gets their guys to play the whole 48, and play to the buzzer. And even a Billups critic would say that he's been objectively very, very good in those areas. I think that's the priority right now. And I also think, frankly, that in a town where we have trouble sometimes attracting free agent talent, having a coach that, relates to the modern NBA player, that we still got players that remember competing against this guy. Like you've been saying all show, he's got a really good reputation around the league as a relatable guy who gets the modern NBA. And I'd rather have a guy like that holding the clipboard than some crusty 70-year-old guy with a clipboard. I think it's a better look for us from a free agent standpoint. And I support both the Billups and Cronin extension. That's all I got.
I appreciate it, Dan. Love hearing your voice. There's no question that Coach Billups can connect with players. He's proven that here. But any of their maneuvers, it's not going to be in free agency, right? Most of their maneuvers will come.
Free agency's dead pretty much across the board. You look at last year, the Paul George thing was kind of an outlier, but you're not really seeing. I don't know if we're ever going to see a 2019 free agent summer where Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving go to Brooklyn. Kawhi Leonard goes to the Clippers. I don't think we're ever going to see that type of thing again, where multiple all stars or all NBA guys are just changing teams in free agency. I think a lot of that stuff is going to happen in trades, and then you kind of fill out free agency wise. It's going to be a lot of just kind of role players and filling out the gaps in the roster. That's why I brought up like point guard depth. Like that's not I don't have names off the top of my head, but like that's because like if they're going to make a move in free agent, it's going to be some sort of depth piece like that. They're not going to whoever their number next star or like their next franchise guy is. That's not going to be somebody that they're getting in free agency.
Yeah. Do you think with potential trades they could make with guys like Grant or Ant that they would look to bring in a starting type player or those good role players?
Depends on who it is. I mean, what did you think Denny Avdia was when they traded for him? Because they used, Malcolm Brogdon was the money that they used, and they used a couple of picks. Do you think, would you have
I did not think he was going to become the best player on the team.
No, I didn't either. And I think they thought he would eventually, but I didn't think they thought he would, the first year. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's just such a case-by-case thing. I don't know how much value. I mean, I think Simons probably has the most trade value of any of those veterans that they have. I don't know how much trade value Grant has because of his contract, and I think DeAndre Ayton's reputation around the league kind of still is what it is from Phoenix, even though he's, had some good moments here in Portland. So I'm not going to sit here and say, like, oh, I know, like, the Blazers could make a trade for a star, and they should go after this guy, this summer. I mean, that's people who get paid a lot more money than I do. It's their job to figure that out.
Yeah, you mentioned point guard. I wouldn't mind if they were to find someone either draft or in the trade market that could, shoot the three ball at a high percentage.
Yeah, if they don't end up in the top four and end up with one of kind of the top level guys, Con Knipple from Duke, that's one guy that as far as a shooter and just a guy that kind of can fit in the way they want on the wing. That kind of that would be somebody that would be worth looking at if they can get him. I don't know if he'll still be there at 9 or 10, but that's just one name off the top of my head. I haven't really fully started draft prep yet.
Let's go out to the Preacher. Hey, Preacher, you're on with Chad Doing and Sean Highkin, my brother. What's up?
Well, bro, congratulations on getting us through another season. And I'm sure the only one who's happy right now is Puppy Shots.
Puppy Shots is happy because he gets to see more of my face every day. He was very happy this morning, I might add.
I believe it. I know how it works in that sports world. And then, Sean, man, I appreciate your coolness because if I was you doing it as a stock investor, I'd be like, buy, sell, buy, sell. And, as a Blazer guy, you always brought a cool demeanor, especially in tough situations. I appreciate that. Hey, I got to go RPG here, if you don't mind, man. As a Blazer fan, most of us don't even know what tanking is. So we look at the win and lose record. We've always been kind of spoiled being in the playoffs. So there's been this new genre of learning what it means to tank and how long it takes when you do a rebuild. I just don't think today's era has that stomach for it or any idea. And even me and Chad were always about the playoffs. But then we were like, I think there came a point where I was like, okay, yeah, I agree with him. Yeah, this is not working. Something has to change if you can't get the the all-star talent into Portland because of whatever tax code, whatever. Either which way, or the rain. As for Chauncey Billups and Coach Malone, it's kind of funny. Both of them are preaching defense, and of course there's Nate McMillan, who's also coaching defense, a past defensive coach who worked under Coach K, had great reflection on Olympic narratives. I mean, he was definitely an assistant coach, worked under one of the most successful coaches. And here we are with Chauncey Billups literally getting an extension, which I agree upon, wholeheartedly. And then there's Malone losing out after just 2 years at winning a championship. And just like Milwaukee and the Denver ownership, both of them canceled each other out. Small market ownership canceled out their coaches ASAP. And I feel that was kind of sad and a slap in the face. And I just kind of want to say this in the end is like, dude, all this lottery talk is like me going back to high school and thinking about my prom chance of dates. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to hook up with someone, all right?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like our chances of getting Cooper Flag and my chances of getting that much away to date with Charlize Theron. It's not happening. That's what it feels like to me. But you and I were talking about this yesterday, Sean. Tanking does suck.
It's not fun. I mean, you saw it. I mean, last year was worse than this year as far as like it being, what was going on for a whole season. Like it seems like a great idea to, oh yeah, you got to just, get a high draft pick and then that's your next star. You could end up like Charlotte where it's just never going to happen.
No, and that's why, and you heard from the same fans I did, people were excited about this season to see the young guys develop and play with energy. And it's pretty simple. If you play defense and play hard for 48 minutes, Blazer fans will embrace you. And they saw a lot of that this year from the guys who went out there and grinded.
Absolutely.
Denny Avdia and Tamani Kamara play hard.
Yeah,
and you can see it jumps out on the screen.
Those are the two guys that I saw the most jerseys of in the stands this season out of the current players.
Yeah, and no surprise, but Luka's number 77 is the number one selling jersey. Good job, Dallas. Gosh, what a bunch of morons they are. All right, we'll come back. Heiken's going to be with me for one more segment. We're going to play that clip from Billups, which is a good one, talking about star players. Could there be one on this roster right now? We'll hear that next on the Rip City Drive.
Here's what you need to know. From the Goldberg Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
All right, it's now 5 o'clock, Chad here. Trailblazers season is over, but Chauncey Billups agreed on a multi-year contract extension with the team. He's back as head coach. Sean Highkin is in studio with me right now. We're going to recap the Masters with David Coleman coming up at 5:20. The Suns have fired head coach Mike Budenholzer. In New Orleans, they fired general manager David Griffin. And the NBA playoffs will kick off tomorrow with the play-in tournament. Hawks are at the Magic at 4:30, followed by the Grizzlies at the Warriors. The winner of that game will meet the Rockets in round one of the Western Conference playoffs. More of the Rip City Drive coming at you right now.
The home of the OSAA is 620 Rip City Radio.
Yeah.
All right, Sean Highkin hanging out for another 12 or 13 minutes. I found the clip, and Sean assisted me in finding the clip. And this is, well, why don't you set this up? I think it was Jason Quick that asked the question.
It was Jason that asked the question. So Chauncey said something in one of his previous answers about how he likes how much balance there is on this roster in terms of it's not all dependent on, just one guy going off and scoring all the points. And the question that Jason asked, which I think is a very fair one, is, yes, a balanced roster with a lot of guys that can contribute is great, but in order to, most people would say that in order to win at a high level in the NBA, you need to have like a number one guy. Like Chauncey's Detroit team in 04 is basically the only title team in the modern era that didn't really have that type of guy. And so, Jason asked, the question was for Joe, and it was about like, how do you go about getting that? And the answer Joe gave was pretty standard. Like, we believe in a lot of our guys, but we also know we have to get better externally, make some different moves. And then Chauncey jumped in, and Chauncey had something else to say, and this is what I want you to play.
I look around the league, right, and you say having a star, and it's true. You gotta have top flight guys. But to me, I think we're raising that. All right, I think we're growing that. Like I look at when OKC traded for Shea, he wasn't a star. He wasn't a star yet. Now he's probably going to be the MVP of the league. Joker wasn't a star when he got to Denver. They raised him into that. Giannis wasn't a star when he got to Milwaukee. They raised him into that. And I just think there's beauty in that because, again, when you raise them into that, they're raised playing the right way. And all of those guys, they just play right. They don't give me the ball, watch out, I got it. They just play right with the team because they was raised into that stardom. And that's where I think we're trying to go here. You look at hopefully some of the leaps. You look at what Denny's done and Shaden and Scoots taking a leap. I thought Ant had a really good job. We're raising the guys. Talk about that stretch we was on. DA was 22-15 on that stretch that we just got a lot of situations that we're raising that I think are pretty cool. So most people would say, yeah, go get such and such, or yeah, go. Well, we might have that person. We might already have those guys, but we'll see.
All right, Sean, that was a very interesting answer from Chauncey because he wanted to engage. He stepped in to talk to Quick because he wanted to answer.
Joe.
Yeah.
The question was for Joe, and Joe gave his answer, and then Chauncey took the mic and said, there's something I want to say about this too.
So what jumped out at you with his comments there?
So overall, it was about a 25-minute press conference between the two of them. I think overall, they both did very well and said what they needed to say to all the questions that were asked, and I think everybody in local media did a pretty good job of asking the questions that needed to be asked. That was the one thing that made my eyebrow raise up a little, where I was like, yeah, I don't know if I would have done that. Because, yes, it's certainly true that, you look at some of the guys like Denny Avdia, Toumani Camara, guys like that on the Blazers roster who definitely outperformed their expectations this season. But Chauncey is out here comparing, basically pointing to literally the three best players in the NBA, which I think most people would say: Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai's going to win probably MVP this year. Most people agree that Jokic is the best player in the league currently. Giannis has won 2 MVPs and the championship and all that stuff. And Chauncey is saying, hey, these guys weren't stars when they came into the league, and they became, MVPs and, superstars and all-time great players. So maybe that's a sign that maybe we have that guy already on the roster. And my reaction to that was, it was kind of the same thing as, a couple of years ago, they draft Scoot 3rd overall. And, with the Dame stuff still being up in the air on the night of the draft and, the days after the draft, Joe sold Scoot as this transcendent talent. And, he's going to be, he's, ready to win right away. So you put that on him right when he gets drafted. And then, when Scoot isn't ready, his rookie year really, and, it's kind of rough early on. Now that's kind of putting him under a microscope. So, looking at, the 3 best players in the league, Chauncey brings up as, examples of, we might already have our next superstar on the roster. I mean, look, it would be awesome for them if Denny Avdia or Shaden Sharp or Toumani Camara becomes that type of guy. If one of those guys wins MVP in the next couple of years, that certainly changes a lot about how, this Blazers team is the direction they're headed and where their ceiling is. I just think it's maybe a little bit ambitious to just bring that up as, those 3 extreme outlier examples as a sign that maybe they don't have to go out and, upgrade talent to the degree that maybe people think they do.
I think it's always difficult when you put a young player in a position where they're being compared to one of the greats. Just like with Cooper Flagg, for example.
Yeah.
If you come out and say he's going to be the next Larry Bird, that's not fair to Cooper Flagg.
Or he's Kevin Garnett or he's Kevin Durant or he's, it's okay, that's, sure. Or Zion Williamson was getting Charles Barkley comparisons when he's coming out. It's okay, if he does now, it's you put that on him. It probably falls.
So if
short.
he's anything less than that,
right,
he could still be a very good player. But if he's less than that, then people are going to think it's a failure. So it is tough when you compare, potential players to that to greatness. The one thing that did stand out to me because it kind of gave me a look into how Chauncey sees things. I thought maybe that's why he's so hard on certain players, like Shaden Sharp, for example. Why he benched him, why he used him as an example. And it's because he probably looks at Shaden and sees someone that has a chance to be a great player and wants to make sure that he's putting everything into that because he has high expectations for him. He believes in him.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's definitely part of it it's that. And Chauncey's overall point, by the way, I'm not I don't want to say that I don't understand what Chauncey's saying here. His overall point that sometimes guys that you already have in house can exceed expectations is well taken. And I think in the case of certainly Toumani Camara being a late 2nd round pick who has worked his way into getting, all defense votes and having an all defense case. In those cases, that and also Denny Avdia, who's been a lot better this year than I even think they thought they were when they traded for him. And, it can be true that thing. You
just don't need to use the names.
I just don't know if I would have literally said the 3 best players in the NBA all having unlikely MVP trajectories. I don't know if I just don't know if I would have done that. And I think if Chauncey was doing that press conference over again, I think he might have dialed that back a little bit.
Yeah, well, especially with Giannis and Jokic, who are 2 of the most unique, dominant, big guys in the history of the league.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Denny Avdia wins MVP next season, then that changes a lot for the Blazers. But I don't know if that's really a realistic expectation to put on anybody.
And I got to give it up for Shai Gilgeous. He is.
Yeah.
He's a bad boy.
That's a good example of a guy that, what was he, the 10th or 11th pick in the draft that year coming out of Kentucky? And, he had a good year his rookie year with the Clippers. And, he was just kind of the type of young prospect that you include in a trade for somebody like Paul George. But I don't think anybody thought that he was going to be an MVP.
I don't know what he's going to be 4 or 5 years from now. I just know that right now, Shai Gilgeous is white hot, meaning he's in total peace with his game. He can get to his spots and get whatever he wants. That's how good he is. It's almost automatic for Shai right now.
Does it on both ends, too.
He's a darn good basketball player. I like watching him play. Yeah. And he's – what's unique about Shai that I like watching is that he's one of those guys that he can get his own shot whenever he wants, but he does a good job of keeping his teammates involved. He's bought into the concept with what Daigneault wants to accomplish, but yet knows when to crank it up and get his own shot. He's found the balance.
Everybody, and I guess this is kind of what the Blazers are trying to build here, where, they just have, even their guys who are the quote-unquote stars are all kind of, play the way that they play, and they it's all kind of feeds into the machine. I don't know. I just think it's a little bit ambitious for a team that, as much as they had a great second half of the season, a team that just won 36 games to be talking about, like, we think that, we have the potential to be as good. Like, I don't know. I think that I just think that's a little bit ambitious.
Yeah, the reason why star power, at least in my mind, is so important in the league is, well, one, it's been pretty apparent my entire life watching the NBA. But take the Celtics, for example. They have a team concept.
Yeah.
They move the basketball, they find the open shooter, and they knock down threes at an alarming rate. But when things get tight and they start to break down, they can kick it to Tatum or Jaylen Brown, and
They
those two
do.
guys can go and create their own buckets.
They have those guys. And I will say also, I understand why Chauncey feels that, because the team that Chauncey won a championship with in Detroit, where it was him and Rasheed Wallace and Tayshaun Prince and Ben Wallace, Rip Hamilton. That was kind of like none of those guys. I mean, Ben Wallace and Chauncey are in the Hall of Fame now, but none of those guys were ever like superstar number one type scorers ever. But that's also one of the only times in NBA history that a team that's built like that has actually won a title.
They're a true outlier.
Yeah.
A true outlier. It's very interesting.
But Chauncey was a part of it, and so I totally understand why he feels like he can replicate it.
Absolutely. And it's probably a good message you can send to his guys like, hey, we can do this the way we're constructed right now.
Yeah.
All right, so moving into the offseason, I think you and I are on the same page. Is it really the most important question? Is it about the vets that they have on the roster and what they're going to do with the vets?
I think you have to figure something out at the minimum with Jeremy Grant and Anthony Simons this summer. I don't know how easy that's going to be, especially with Grant with his contract, but those are the two, I think. Like with Grant, very, very clearly, their two starting forwards, going into next season have to be Toumani Camara or Denny Avdia. And then with Simons, he's done the last year of his contract. So, if they keep him next year, then I guess it's not like the biggest deal in the world. But if you really believe in Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp as your long-term backcourt, then you probably need to figure something out there.
All right. So for you, you've been focused on the Chauncey Billups extension, the Joe Cronin extension. So now you'll move into what? Digging through the exit interviews, and you're going to focus on that at Rose Garden Report coming up next?
Yeah, I haven't even gone back and listened back to any of the player exit interview stuff. I've just been so, tied up with the Chauncey Joe stuff. So I'm going to do that over the next couple of days and then start getting into lottery prep mode. And then I'm going to Chicago next month for the lottery and the pre-draft combine. And then after that, we're fully into pre-draft mode and then the draft and then free agency. And then I'm going to Las Vegas for Summer League. So the next about 3 months are going to be still pretty busy, even though the season's over.
Yeah, so the next big date for Trailblazer fans really is May 12th,
May
right?
12th, yep, draft lottery.
All right, draft lottery then. All right, Sean Highkin, you can read him at rosegardenreport.com. And he's our Trailblazer Insider. You can follow him on social at Highkin. Hey, thanks for coming in, man. I know you've been busy the last 24 hours, but it's great to have you in studio to get a chance to talk about the extension and the end of the season, and now we move and look forward to the lottery on May 12th. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, it's always great to be here, Chad.
And I appreciate all your help and work throughout the course of the season. It was awesome.
That's been fun.
All right, Sean Highkin, we'll come back. We're going to focus on the Masters and the finish and how it went down with Rory. David Coleman, PGA Dave's coming up next. Well, Rory McIlroy has now completed the career Grand Slam, and joining us now to talk about it is our PGA pro, David Coleman, who's back. Now, David, how great was that Masters? That's one of the better ones I remember seeing in recent history.
Yeah, Chad, thanks for having me back on, man. Yeah, it was a great tournament. I mean, I thought, there was so much unpredictability. First couple rounds, there was a lot of wind. And then, on the weekend, there were definitely some opportunities to score, but they set the golf course up, I thought, pretty fair. There were some tough pins, some different pins. And I think it was really exciting because, it gave these guys definitely a different look than what they had seen. And it really was, a Masters for the ages for sure.
So what did you make of Rory's performance where he got off to a rough start and DeChambeau regained the lead early in the round, and then DeChambeau fell apart, and then Rory had that rough patch on 13 and 14, and then he missed the putt on 18. There were so many times where it looked like he was going to blow it, and yet he found the resolve to be able to get over the hump and get into a playoff.
Yeah, I think both guys were really, really nervous. I think that was the thing, you saw early on. I think both guys, didn't really say, I don't think they said anything to each other the whole round. I think, with the crowds being out there the way they were, it was a really intense moment. And I think, when you're in that kind of moment, it's all, and the reality is, Chad, you can't play match play against each other because you got the rest of the field there. So, I think it was almost like everyone wanted a head-to-head battle, and there were all these other guys that were still in the mix, and especially on that golf course where you can make eagles on the par fives, you can definitely birdie, many of the holes too, because, some of the holes are short and there's opportunities on them. And then there's par threes that are very difficult. And then there's a hole like 11 where, you could really make a mistake, as we saw yesterday with Bryson. So I think the reality is that, it's a course where there's always trouble looming, but if you know how to play it, like some of these veteran guys have over the years, whether it's Nicklaus or Tiger, whoever it may be, you can really, shoot some good scores out there. So, yeah, there was no doubt. I mean, Rory was feeling the pressure, and you could see that at the end when he won. I mean, the nerves and everything just came out of him because this had been, in his mind forever, it seemed like.
With Bryson, that meltdown on hole 11, what mistake did he make on that hole there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, Chad, is you have to listen to, the veteran players who've played well in the Masters, going all the way back to Ben Hogan and then obviously Nicklaus and Tiger and Nick Faldo, guys who've played great on that course and won there. They all said, hit it to the right side of the green. Even if you miss the green right, it's okay because then you have a lot of green to work with to chip up to, and try to get it up and down that way. Bryson was going for the pin. And the crazy thing was, if he makes even a bogey on that hole, he wouldn't have lost any ground to Rory. Rory makes bogey, and he was lucky. His ball didn't go in the water. And Bryson just tried to force the issue. He was hooking the ball all day with his irons. His irons were off. And, he could blame his equipment all he wants. I think some of it was maybe the equipment, but I think some of it's the swing as well. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, there's no doubt that he shouldn't have been that aggressive in that moment because a par or even a bogey wouldn't have hurt him that much, but that double bogey really put him in a spot that just, oh, my God. I mean, it's almost impossible to come back from something like that.
I think you nailed it, though. His iron play from round one until the end, it just wasn't good enough to be able to win a major.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, he, even when he was hitting the greens, early on Sunday or, on Saturday, it seemed like he was really having to make some long putts and really having to lag. His lag putting was great. That's really probably what kept him in the tournament. But there's no doubt that, when he was hitting his irons the way he was hitting them, it really put him in a tough spot. So it's credit to his short game. And a lot of people were really disrespecting his short game. And Bryson's short game is incredible. You don't win two U.S. Opens and have the success he's had in the world of golf without having a great short game. It's just his irons, to me, yeah, and I think he's got to get this fixed by the PGA, and he's so technical and so dialed in that I think he will. But I think at the same time, too, he's got to look at his swing, too, and say, the best players that ever lived hit a little bit of a cut shot. I can't be trying to hit a draw, especially with my club head speed, and it's not going to be able to be controlled.
I got to give props to Justin Rose, too. I laughed at the idea of him going wire to wire when he had the first round lead, and he fell off, but he bounced back and put himself in a position to win the tournament. I thought that was a gutty performance by Rose.
Oh, yeah, no doubt it was. Yeah, because you saw, on the first day at the end of the first round, he was he looked tired. He looked like he was leaking a little bit of oil. And, he at the end, obviously the third day he really struggled on the greens. But then, at the end, he had a great day out there. I think he had 10 birdies. It's incredible to think that, he could have such a great day out there at Augusta, and even given his age, but he still hits the ball plenty far out there. I mean, he was only, I think, 30 yards behind Rory, who's probably one of the longest hitters in the game on 18 there in that playoff. And I think he's always been a fantastic iron player, and the putting is probably the one thing that's held him back from winning more, but there's no doubt, I mean, the consistency he's had in his work ethic. I mean, this was a guy who, when he first, turned pro years ago, I mean, he missed so many cuts, when he first started on the European tour, and now, he's come this far. And I think, honestly, Chad, I think he's definitely a guy who could go into the Hall of Fame someday, considering how good his record's been. And if he's a Ryder Cup captain one day, I think that would even help his cause more. So, yeah, it was a great performance for him. He's got nothing to be ashamed of.
All right, what'd you see from Scotty Scheffler? He was the odds-on favorite to win the tournament. He couldn't get the job done. What was he missing this weekend at Augusta?
It was a little bit of everything. I think his putting wasn't great. It seems like when he struggled the last few years, I mean, struggled is a relative term for him because, usually a bad week for him is still a top 15, maybe top 10. And I think his putting was part of it. I think his ball striking was a little bit off. He really had to grind to shoot the scores he shot. And I think, too, let's face it, Chad, I mean, he missed probably a month of practice, maybe even a little more of that with that hand injury. So I think that was a pretty big thing for him, and there's no doubt that definitely affected him for sure. And I think when you miss a month, and you're playing at that high of a level against guys like Rory and these other guys who are playing all the time and practicing, pretty much every day, even on their off weeks, that's going to really hurt you. So the fact that he's played as good as he has this year is a credit to his talent and his work ethic and his will to win. I think he's going to be back in the winner's circle this year. Maybe at a major, we'll see. But I think the putting is the big thing. If he putts good, he wins. He definitely wins. If he doesn't putt good, he still contends. So that's a credit to how good of a player he really is.
A couple of other guys who had nice showings over the weekend. Oberg, I thought, was nice, and I thought Patrick Reed put together a pretty good tournament as well. And then Corey Connors. All three of those guys I thought played well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, Ludwig is a guy that, it was funny. Ian Baker Finch gave him the nickname like Iceberg at the end, and he's like an Iceman out there. Nothing really bothers him. I mean, I know that last hole he was trying to really force the issue, to make something magical happen there. But, I mean, he had a really good week. And, I mean, he's only played the Masters twice, and he's been in the hunt both times. So that says a lot about his ability. You look at the courses he's won on, as a pro. In his short pro career, he's won on some really good golf courses. And I think, to me, there's no doubt he's going to be around for a long time. His swing is so reliable and repeatable. And I think Patrick Reed, that he's one of those guys that he just doesn't care what anyone says about him. He doesn't care what anyone thinks about him going to live or what his record is. He's just a guy that, let's face it, when he, got on the tour and turned pro, I mean, he had to Monday qualify basically every week, Chad, to get on the tour. So he's a guy that's a bulldog. He's a fierce competitor. He doesn't care if anybody likes him, if they don't like him. But at that course, it definitely fits his ball flight. He hits a little bit of a draw. And I think at the end of the day, Patrick Reed is always a guy, whether he plays LIV, PGA Tour, wherever he plays in the world, he's always going to be a factor in the Masters. And he's just he's a tenacious competitor. There's no doubt about it. And Corey Connors, I mean, you got to give that guy a ton of credit. Here's a guy that, I mean, on tour, he's probably one of the shorter hitters. I think average length on the tour right now is around 300 yards. He's probably 290, 295, which, I mean, for the average person, they're laughing at this as they're listening to it. But, I mean, he's not a bomber. I mean, Rory on Saturday was probably 60 to 70 yards by him on most drives. I mean, so he's not a long hitter, but he's a great iron player. He's improved his short game a lot. And, he's a guy that came from a small school. I mean, he played in the MAC at Kent State. He was teammates with Mackenzie Hughes and Taylor Pendrith, the school that produced Ben Curtis. So guys that are underdogs, unheralded guys that come from areas where golf isn't the biggest thing in Canada. Corey Connors, really proved that he can hang with the best players in the world. He had a really good week, and I think he's going to win more on tour. It's just his putting is really the thing that's kind of held him back from winning more.
Who do you think, which golfer disappointed you with their performance this weekend?
I mean, a lot of people were on Morikawa. There was a lot of people on Wednesday last week that were just seemed like they were really high on Morikawa to win the tournament. And I don't know, man. I just have never trusted that guy's putter. I mean, I feel like when he's putted good, it seems like it's happened on slower greens or it's happened, at times where just everything has come together for him perfectly. I think he's a great ball striker, but I just don't think to win at Augusta, you can't be just a good putter. You got to be a great putter. And I think Rory kind of proved this week that he had moments of greatness on the greens, but Morikawa is not, I wouldn't even say he's even close to Rory as a putter, because there's a lot of times where Morikawa will miss putts that he should make. And the other guy was Rahm. I mean, a lot of people were, saying that, hey, John Rahm's got this experience of winning there. He's won there. He's won a U.S. Open. And I just feel like John Rahm is like a confused man since he went to live. I think part of it is Chad. I think he really misses the PGA Tour like some of those guys do over there. And I think, when they come into these tournaments, they're playing the week before at a course at Doral where it's totally different grass than what Augusta National is. And I think the other part of it, too, is I don't think these guys have played enough competitive golf. I think, you could see that Rory really was in a competitive state of mind. I mean, he's won at Sawgrass. He won at Pebble Beach back early in the winter, and he's really ready to go. And even a couple weeks before when he played at Houston, you could see that was the perfect type of batting practice for him to get ready. And I just think Rahm and those live guys kept the same thing. They're just not they're not the same type of sharpness they were. I mean, when they're playing much more golf on the PGA Tour.
We're talking with PGA David Coleman. All right, the PGA Championship is going to come up next month. It's going to be at Quail Hollow. What are your early thoughts on the PGA?
Man, oh man, what a golf course this is, Chad. They used to play like the Wachovia Championship, then they called it the Wells Fargo, and that tournament's moved out of there. That tournament's going to be in Philly now. But what a test of golf Quail Hollow is. I mean, so many great holes. I mean, the first hole's, I think, 500 yards is an incredible starting hole, and then they've had so many big events there. The President's Cup's been there. They've had the PGA was there when Justin Thomas won it back in 2017. So it's a heck of a course. The last three holes are called the Green Mile. There's 16 is I think 16 you can play over 520. It's a par 4, really tough hole, dog leg right down the hill, and then 17 is a really vicious par 3 over the water, and then 18 is quite a par 4 with a creek running up the left side. You got to be super accurate, and right is no easy bailout because there's a lot of rough on the right side on 18 there, and the green's long, but it's kind of narrow at the same time too, and the water comes into play for sure on the second shot there. So that finishing stretch there at Quail Hollow is just brutal, Chad, and it's a really hard golf course. Rory has a great record there. Rory's won a number of times there, so Rory is no doubt the colossal favorite coming into there. I think it's a golf course. I think Ludwig, it sets up really good for him too with his ball flight. He hits it nice and long and high. And I think it's a golf course where, no doubt you cannot hit it in the rough. I think, obviously it's a course where you drive it in the fairway, you're going to have a massive advantage there. You look at the guys who played well over the years at the Wells Fargo, the Wachovia, whatever it was called. It was always guys who drove the ball super well and got it in the short grass. If you played from the rough there, you struggle to make the cut. So, yeah, it's going to be a fascinating test for the PGA. I love the PGA being in May. And I think Rory right now would be the favorite. Scotty, obviously, Ludwig. And then I think my dark horse right now, Harris English, who had a nice week. A guy who's from the South, grew up playing on grass like that, hits it high in the air. So it'll be fun to watch, man. But you just, with the PGA being in May, I think it's great. We got all this momentum from Augusta, and the next major's coming up in a few weeks, so it'll be awesome.
Well, it's PGA David Coleman here on the RipCityDrive. Well, Dave, I appreciate your time. I love talking golf with you. Appreciate you making the show better, and I look forward to talking PGA with you, buddy.
Yeah, it's going to be great in a few weeks, man. And, congrats again to Rory for winning the Grand Slam. And I think it's a good thing for golf. And I guess the mantra, the best player never to win at Augusta now probably falls on Bryson. So that's going to be fun to see him deal with the media next year and just kind of where things go from here with the tour and with Liv. And let's hope these guys all get back together because it was a heck of a tournament when these guys get together and play. We just need to see it more often.
No question about it, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Awesome, man.
There you go. There's PGA David Coleman here on the RipCityDrive breaking it down. And hopefully, like he said, momentum coming out of that tournament, the Masters, will bring more eyeballs to the game of golf because that was some great competition. Great individual performances and a gutty performance by Rory McIlroy to bounce back and be able to get the job done. All right, telephone number 503-248-0620. You can find me on social at Chad in Rip City. and I am pursuing something potentially big for tomorrow's show, so I will keep you posted on that as well. Chris Burkhardt is going to have a Courtside Monday coming up at 6 o'clock, and he'll continue the breakdown on exit interview day coming out of the season finale yesterday against the Lakers. And Chauncey Billups getting a new extension with the team. So a lot of good news here in Rip City. And now we can move on to the offseason. Next big date will be May 12th. That's going to be NBA Draft Lottery night, and we'll figure out where the Trailblazers are going to be picking in the NBA Draft in June. Obviously, Cooper Flagg would be amazing, but even just jumping up into the top 4 and be able to access more talent. And the reason why Cooper Flagg would be so great is all this talk about getting a number 1 or having a true number 1. That would be solved in a heartbeat to add Cooper Flagg in the mix. But, when you got, 3.7% chance to make that happen, it's unlikely. But we can hope. We can hope. But that's what's coming up. That's the next big date to keep an eye on is May 12th. And then the draft, which is in June. And we'll see how things shake out with the NBA play-in tournament, which is going to be a lot of fun. I still can't believe the Warriors blew that game to the Clippers yesterday, and now they're in the play-in. So they will host the Grizzlies tomorrow night, 7 o'clock on TNT. The winner of the Grizzlies and Warriors will play the Rockets in round number 1. And then the Hawks and Magic from Orlando, the winner of that game will take on Boston in round number 1. So good luck to the Hawks or Magic. Congratulations. You just earned a first-round matchup with the Boston Celtics. And then Wednesday, you've got the 2 9-10 matchups, Heat and Bulls, followed by the Mavericks and Kings. Yeah. I really don't know. Not sure it really matters. Oklahoma City is a beast. I just don't think that anyone in the Western Conference will be able to knock off Oklahoma City. They finished out the year with 68 wins, 16 more than second-place Houston, 18 more than third-place L.A. Top 10 defense, top 10 offense. They've been by far the best team. Not even close. At a home record of 35-6. So your first-round matchups that we know right now, Lakers and Timberwolves, Nuggets and Clippers. My guess is the Warriors will win tomorrow, and they'll move on to meet the Rockets. In the Eastern Conference, we know that we have the Knicks and the Pistons and the Pacers and the Bucks. The Eastern Conference is much less appealing to the eye than the Western Conference. I really want to see the Lakers. I wanted the Lakers and Warriors to match up in the first round because that'd be fascinating. All right, we'll keep things rolling. Chris Burkhardt will join me next and give us a preview of what's coming up on Courtside. You got the RipCityDrive with Chad doing. All right, Chris Burkhardt in studio. He's got Courtside Monday coming up at 6 o'clock. And just like that, it's over. It's gone.
You're gonna get so tired of me.
I know.
I'm gonna be outside that window right here with like, hey, can I come on? I missed the mic.
When does your season die down with OSAA?
Not
Right
till
now?
the end of May.
Oh yeah.
I got 2 weeks, and I go straight into speech championships, and we'll have track, baseball, all that through May. So I got a journey still.
Your journey's not completed yet.
Yeah, well, it's gonna be real fun, next year when the Blazers fulfill the prophecy and make the playoffs. And then I have playoff games to cover and state championships. That'll be the dream.
What was your reaction to Chauncey Billups getting re-signed?
Understood it. I understood why. I mean, I get it. And that was my big thing. I think that you look at this entire tenure, no one wants to hear it, but this entire tenure for any coach, I've always found to be incredibly hard to gauge. I mean, you start in with a team that has C.J. McCollum and Damian Lillard and the aspirations. You pull the rug out from him right there. You start the rebuild. You start bringing in all the young guys. And then you have a coach who I think was, a good hire. But I loved in this conference that he had yesterday talking about how, I wasn't ready when they first got it. I've learned a lot here. And I think it's good to have a coach who understands where his shortcomings are, because that means he's paying attention and he's learning, which I truly think he is. But then you look at this last 3-4 months and everyone goes, oh, you're going to, last 4 years mean nothing just because he did good the last 4 months. Well, the last 4 months were kind of the first time that we actually felt like the team was going in a decided direction, right? Had a roster around him, had the talent around him, and said, this is where we're going. And the results were right there. And it's always easy to say that, coach didn't have an impact, but players don't just get better on their own, right? Part of that has to be coaching. So you got to give them a little bit of credit there. And you look at guys like Denny and Tu and Shea and even Donovan Clingan. Look at how much better DC got once he started getting a run and towards the end of the year. And part of that's coaching. So I understand it. And last on that too, Chad, look what happened in Denver. You let go of a coach and a general manager. Why? Because they weren't in lockstep. They were in constant battle. Who should we go get? Who should we play? I don't agree with you, blah, blah, blah. Hey, we're just going to cut bait with both of them. I think it speaks volumes that Joe and Chauncey are in lockstep together and are going in the same direction at the same time.
I'm a big believer in continuity. And they definitely have that right now. And I've been told, and I believe this too, that, having the defensive improvement we've seen second half of the season, with young guys keeping the same staff intact with the same system, that could be helpful as they continue to develop moving forward.
But what did you hear from the players post-game about that? They all loved Chauncey, and guys like DA pointed out that, it's nice going into next year knowing I'm not having a new coach, right? Because I love what Chauncey, he basically said Chauncey unlocked me this year, and I was playing really good basketball because of it, and not having to readjust, learn a new system, learn everything is nice. Yeah. And that means something.
Let's go out to Eddie in Vancouver. Eddie, appreciate the phone call. You're up on the Rip City Drive with Chad Doing and Chris Burkhardt. What's on your mind?
Hey, Chad and Chris. Man, I just want to thank you guys on a good season. You guys do a good job. Man, I've been working swing for 16 years, and I've been listening to you, Chad, for at least, I know for sure 8. But, man, I'm a mass communication major. I'm not in mass communications, but in college, dude, you're the real deal, Chad, man. You're a treasure to the city. We're lucky to have you, man. It's so nice to hear you on the airwaves, man. And I just also want to give you props, Chad, when Lillard requested the trade. Remember you came in there on that Saturday? I do like side jobs on Saturday. I was turn on 620 and you were on. I thought, let me turn to 620. But, dude, that was so big for you to come in on a Saturday when it's beautiful golfing weather, and golfing, I'm sure, just started. And, what that reminds me of when I was in college, I went to this Marymount College in L.A. It's Loyola Marymount Sister School. But during the L.A. riots in 92, Tom Petty came in the studio and dropped a song, We Need Peace in L.A. But when you came in here on that Saturday, that's what it reminded me of, man. I think about it all the time. But just good job, you guys, man. And the things you said yesterday about the data, the data's in on these players. The stuff you're preaching 3 years ago, how hard it was. You guys came there with a smile on your face. And now we have something to smile about, something to look forward. Remember, Chad, this is Eddie. I'll keep holding on. Remember on the Name That Tune I missed, Holding Back the Years.
That's right, man.
And but you guys remember, but we keep holding on, man, and here we are.
No, dude, I appreciate it, dude. Hey,
one last thing before I close. One last thing, Chad. I live right by a golf course in Vancouver, I don't know why I can't think of the name right now, but it's a green space where I walk my dog. When I hear those balls hit, I do think of you. I was like, man, Chad's probably happy he's going out golfing and stuff. And, man, enjoy the summer, Chad. I look forward to listening to you for the, duration of, the summer until the next Blazer season. So good job, man, and everyone. Chad, Travis too, man.
Hey.
And this year too, it's like Blazer. We're like family, you guys. Like the broadcast team and everything, man. Never have I felt this closer to this Blazer team before in my 53 years in Portland, Oregon. Thank you, and have a good afternoon, Chad.
You got it, buddy. Thanks, Eddie. I appreciate that. I do remember that day when Dame got traded.
So do I. Don't we all?
So do I.
We had Justin and the
that
Godfather. Everyone was on board. We were. That's pretty fun.
I did. I drove from the golf course to the station. Yeah.
That's what you got to do sometimes. But look, it left an impact, Chad. Showing up on a Saturday to talk about it. People wanted to hear their local voices. That's big time.
That's cool. That's great. No, I'm excited. I'm excited that, there's no coach search. They've got everything intact, and now they can move into the offseason. We'll find out where they're going to be picking coming up on May 12th, and they got work to do. Right now, I talked to Sean and I talked to Travis, and they both agreed on, the biggest question moving into the offseason. So I'll ask you, what is the biggest question or biggest thing you think they need to solve this offseason?
It's going to be depth around those young guys because there's going to be some moving parts. And I know you talked about it with Sean, but if you can get another big-time player in here, like I had a guy ask me the other day, like if you got the 9th pick, would you trade it to Houston for a guy like Jabari Smith? Yeah, give me a guy like that who's a big power forward who can play multiple positions, can guard multiple positions, fits the mold of what Chauncey's trying to do, and maybe the guy who just needs a little bit of a jump start in a new spot like Denny did. So that's what I'm looking for. What kind of bodies can you bring in? Because they're going to have to bring people in.
Yeah.
I thought you hit it on the head, too. A shooter. Going to need a shooter. You got a lot of defenders. Now you need someone you can pass the ball to who's going to hit that corner three with, money.
But Boston's got a whole gaggle of them.
Right? Get me Peyton Pritchard. Pretty good backup guard. I'd pay him to come play here.
He can come home.
It's pretty simple in Boston. It's like, hey, if you can shoot threes, we'll put you in the lineup.
Yeah, right.
You'll get time.
Who is Sam Hauser? Whoa, okay. Wasn't familiar with your game.
All right, Chris Burkhart's got Courtside Monday coming up next. Big thanks for your time. I'll be back tomorrow with the Rip City Drive at 3 here on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio.